All right. Well, welcome to episode 15 of the Community of Wisdom Seekers. And tonight, the wisdom sharer is Fabrice Metan from Simplify My Numbers. And he does some
Hello.
accounting, CFO work for small, medium-sized businesses here in Wichita, Kansas, and surrounding areas. And tonight, he is coming to us to let us know how to take advantage of the second round and the urgency we need to have behind some things, and give us some knowledge and wisdom behind things that we don't know about the package so that we can be fully aware, fully educated, and be able to just do what we need to do moving forward as a responsible business owner or 1099 or independent contractor, whatever you're going to call yourself for this time. So thanks, Fabrice. I appreciate you being on, giving us your time and your wisdom tonight, and I'll let you have the stage,
My
man.
pleasure. Yeah, for sure. So, as you mentioned, my name is Fabrice Metan. I am the owner of Simplify My Numbers. We are a tax and accounting company. So basically, we specialize on providing accounting services to small and medium-sized businesses. All the way from your average bookkeeping and payroll services to CFO services, where we actually, help our business owners make decisions about the future, seek funding from banks, strategize, think through their tax strategy and things of that kind. And so, everything financial accounting is pretty much what we do. In the past, I was actually working as a controller and CFO in the construction industry for about 7 years. And then I started my own agency in 2018. Basically when I left, my previous opportunity, initially I was a co-founder in an advertising agency. And while I was helping run that agency, I was also getting a lot of calls, a lot of knock at the door from people that knew that I was, an accountant and a CFO and wanted me to kind of help them with their businesses. Now that they felt I had the freedom to do so. And so, at first I was a little hesitant. Am I going to give, that knowledge? Is it time for me to dive back into it? And then later on, I decided that it was time, just simply because there was a lot of people seeking that information. And so I've done that, in the past couple of years. It's been great. It's been extremely exciting. I never realized how much this knowledge that I had was valuable, especially for the size of businesses that I'm helping now. Because the companies in the past that I worked with were companies, with market cap around $30 million of, annual revenue. And now we're talking micro businesses that are between, your self-employed all the way to, 5 to 10 employees. So very small companies, but you're realizing how much knowledge they never had really access to. And so it's very exciting to be able to bring that to the table and help them the best I can. So yeah, in terms of this program, with the CARES Act, do you kind of want me to kind of give a summary of that first before we dive into questions?
Yeah, if you could just give us some details on just
Okay,
what's going on, what's
gotcha.
happening, just what you've learned. I know you've been really diving and digging in. It's forced you to research.
Yeah,
So if you can just give us the shortcut, we would appreciate that.
yeah, for sure. Let me go ahead and do that. So basically, obviously, in the CARES Act, the main thing that that the government wanted to do was to provide new opportunities for small businesses to not only keep their doors open, but also keep people employed. And so they created a few opportunities to help us do that. And the main ones that you probably heard a lot about is your Paycheck Protection Program, which is also known as PPP, and then the Economic Injury Disaster Loan that they also call EIDL or EIDL loan, right? And so these two, opportunities are a little bit different. And to kind of summarize what's going on, the EIDL loan is a loan that you apply for through the SBA, and the PPP loan is something that you apply through banks that are actually partnering with the SBA to offer this program. And so the EIDL loan was a little confusing at first because this loan was a two-part opportunity. The first part was the grant opportunity, which everyone initially thought was $10,000 to be funded within 3 days, as long as you have a business. And then that conversation kind of shifted and changed to $1,000 per employee up to $10,000. And so that portion right there was the grant portion of the opportunity. What that means is if you were to receive the grant, you do not have to pay that back to the SBA, but it has nothing to do with the actual loan. The loan, the actual idle loan, is a loan that is intended to be amortized over up to 30 years. For for-profit companies, it will be at 3.75% of interest rate. And for nonprofits, it will be at 2.75%. And so that is a loan that essentially is not forgivable, but is intended to help small businesses use the money to cover their working capital over the next 6 months. So that is one separate opportunity that you apply for through the SBA website, so through the SBA portal. Unfortunately, obviously those programs have ran out of money since last week, and so they shut down the portal on the SBA website. But now that the government has approved more funding for the programs, we're expecting that to come back live very soon. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that. Now, the second program, which was the one that I would say was more exciting for most small businesses out there, is the PPP loan, which is basically stands for Paycheck Protection Program. And the idea there was that we were giving you an opportunity to get enough money to spend on mainly payroll expenses, so to keep your people employed for at least the next 8 weeks. And essentially, as long as you were spending the money on payroll, rent, utilities, as well as interest on mortgage debt, then 100% of that money can be forgiven. So as long as the money was used, the dollars were used correctly, you're basically getting a free loan. And the way that this works is it's a loan that you actually have to go through your bank or any banks out there really that are participating in the program to be able to apply through the bank. The bank then takes all of the information, sends the information that they received from you to the SBA, and then the SBA approves it. Then the bank basically, gives you the loan opportunity. So initially, when you first get the loan, this is not something that is forgiven as soon as you get it, right? So you're going to sign loan documents from the banks just like you were receiving a bank loan. So you sign everything. I believe that it will be financed over 1% and is payable over 2 years. There's a deferment period there of 6 months before you start paying. But overall, the loan is supposed to be paid back within 2 years. Now, if you receive the loan and that you applied 100% of those funds towards the expenses that I mentioned earlier, which was payroll, rent, utilities, interest on mortgage debts, that was basically put in place before February 15th, then you can get essentially 100% of those dollars forgiven. And so what that means is that at the end of those 8 weeks, you will basically apply for forgiveness towards the bank that gave you the loan and show proof that you used the funds like you were intended to do so, and then you get 100% forgiveness on that loan. So overall, that is what those programs were about. Now, for some companies that did not get a chance to put their hands on the PPP nor the EIDL loan, there was also the ERC, which is Employee Retention Credits, where essentially the idea there was that as long as you were keeping your people employed, 50% of the wages that you paid to those employees can be refunded back to you. So essentially, you do have to pay those employees, and then you can sign, fill out a form that you send back to the IRS to be able to get 50% forgiveness. 50% refunds of the money that you paid. So those were kind of the opportunities that were available. And the one thing that has been unfortunate is that as the program, when the program got funded, within 2 weeks, the money was already gone. And so obviously when they saw the success of the program, they went back to the government and were able to negotiate to have, more funding brought back into the program. And so now they have an additional $310 billion that have been approved. And all of the banking contacts that I've talked to are basically expecting that money to come in within maybe a week or two. And so they are already accepting those applications from small businesses so that they can get ready for the next round of funding. And, I was literally talking to a bank this morning. I can't say the name, but when I mentioned to them that I have one of my clients that is currently, finalizing their numbers so that I can take over the tax return and hopefully submit everything by Monday, the response they gave me was, well, we hope the money lasts that long. Just to let us know, how urgent this is. And I think, if, for businesses that do not want to miss out on this opportunity, you definitely have to start, looking at contacting your bank, asking all the documents that they possibly need. If you need assistance, reach out to your expert or reach out to us. And it's, so that you can get in line as fast as possible. Because I believe that this time around, not only are the banks, better equipped to do what they're supposed to do to get funding out there, the businesses are also, a lot more ready than they were the first time around. And so, the quicker you get in line, the better it's going to be. So overall, I hope that kind of explains everything.
Yes, it does, Fabrice. And I know when we talked earlier, we talked a little bit about just keeping track of how you spend that money and the importance of kind of showing some documentation, because when it comes to the forgivable piece, if you're missing some of that, then maybe you could get in trouble. Obviously, we won't avoid that. I know this is going to be kind of a headache for those checking in on these things on the back end. My mind can't even wrap around the administrative piece of the thing. But just so that we're protected, can you give us some tips on that piece of it so that we are not having to worry about that at the end for forgiveness?
For sure. So it kind of depends on how your particular business is set up, right? Because it's going to be different for partnerships that actually have employees, W-2 employees that they pay. It'll be a little bit different for sole proprietors or self-employed individuals, and a little bit different for S corps. So let me kind of break down, what that looks like. So the straightforward piece for a company that has W-2 wages, what's going to happen is that whenever you ask for forgiveness, the bank is probably going to request the 941 form. And the 941 form is a quarterly tax form that you send out to the IRS every 3 months, basically showing how much payroll you've paid and the taxes that have been withheld, right? And then if there's a discrepancy there, you pay whatever balance is due. But on that form, they'll be able to see exactly the total wages that have been paid over that period of time, and then be able to decide from there what can be forgiven. I'm going to say that will be one of the documentation, probably the financials of the company, so the income statement as well, so they can see exactly those dollar amounts, for rents, utilities, things like that. And so as far as companies that have W-2 wages, it's going to be a lot more straightforward, right? Because they can quickly, look up those documents and basically submit that. Now, for S corps, the idea, with an S corp, just so people understand what that is, generally those are entities where it's pretty much a sole proprietor that pays himself as a W-2 employee. Once the company makes a certain amount of profits, you now have an opportunity to file an S election. And when you file that form, the IRS authorizes you, as long as you pay yourself a reasonable salary, they authorize you to become an S corp. So essentially, your business is an entity that pays you as an employee. And what that means is that you are actually receiving W-2 wages as well. So the same way that a company that employs, W-2 employees would provide, it will be the same way that you would also provide documentation for yourself as a W-2 earner for an S corp. Now, when you're a sole proprietor, that's when it gets tricky, because what happens with sole proprietors is that the money is in the account. We basically take draws every time that we need it, right? And so this is where I advise for sole proprietors that you definitely have at least 2 separate bank accounts, where you have your personal account, but also the business account where the money went to, right? Because for most of those banks that you're going to apply for the loan, most of them will require that you have a business bank account anyway, right? So when they fund that and the amount is in your account, we know that the loan forgiveness is going to be over the next 8 weeks after the origination of the loan. So what I recommend is basically that once the money gets deposited, on a weekly basis, you would transfer, 1/8 of the portion of payroll that you were planning to pay yourself, so that there's at least a trail, right, of the payroll that you're getting for yourself, for the company. And then, if you need to pay rent and utilities, you can also rent it through that account, right? The main thing to keep in mind is that 75% of the loan amount has to be spent on payroll. Up to 75% minimum has to be spent on payroll for the amount to be forgiven. So if you're getting about $10,000, you got to spend at least $7,500 on payroll, and then use the $2,500 for rent, utilities, and interest on your debt. So you want to keep that in mind. And then that 7,500, you can say, okay, I'm going to divide that by 8 and basically transfer a weekly amount to myself. I understand that, it hasn't been written anywhere that we can't just write a check for the full amount, but I just know that, from working with bankers for so many years, I know that they love being able to trace things, right? Being able to actually have, a trail and understand exactly what happened. So that's my recommendation for my small business clients.
So let's say I am in this boat where I'm trying to figure some things out. I don't really want to do it myself, just to go through the
Mhm.
work and the hassle of figuring out all the numbers. Actually, before I ask that question, how do I figure out if I am a 1099 self-employed? How do I figure out my number? How do I go about figuring out what it
Yeah.
is that would be my payroll, so to speak?
Yeah. So what the banks want to see at this point, and actually what the SBA wants to see, um, when you're a sole proprietor, when you're a self-employed individual, on your tax return, there's a form called the Schedule C, okay, which is basically the form that's going to break down all the numbers for your business. And so what they're wanting to see is your 2019 tax return with that Schedule C for the business. And essentially on that Schedule C, there is line 31, which is the net profit that you made from that business. What they're saying is, okay, you made X amount of dollars in sales minus all of the expenses that you had. Whatever is left would be essentially what you're paying yourself. Because I mean, that's the only money that you had available to pay yourself anyway, right? So they're looking at line 31 of your Schedule C. And then whatever that total is, they would divide it by 12, essentially, if you were, in business all of 2019, they would divide it by 12 and say this is your average monthly payroll. That number times 2.5 is the value of your loan. So to put it in layman terms, in numbers, you made, $30,000 in sales. You spent about $10,000 in expenses to run your business. So yeah, you now have about $20,000 for the whole year. They would take that $20,000, divide that by 12, and then whatever number you get times 2.5 would be the value of your loan. That's pretty much how it works.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that. And we have a
Mhm.
question with how quickly the first round went and how quickly they're projecting the second round to go. In your opinion, do you sense that there's going to be a third round?
I wouldn't be surprised, honestly. Obviously, there's a lot of things that are coming in play with everything going on. I think if they end up reopening, most states and cities, then that could change, right? Because if they reopen everything for business, then at that point they may just think, hey, everybody's back to business. We don't necessarily have to send back another, more money out there to help those businesses. But with the way things are going, I don't expect that to happen for a little bit longer. And so it wouldn't surprise me if it happens. But again, since we don't know, that is the reason why it is so important to get in line right now. Because we really don't have any idea. The second round was something that we weren't sure about too. But the banks were pretty optimistic. So even as soon as they announced that the funds were depleted, the banks were still telling me, hey, go ahead and send documentation for your clients just in case, because we want to be able to build our backlog for the next round if it ever gets accepted.
So that brings me back to what you talked about earlier with the person you talked to from the bank this morning. They said the funds will
Mhm.
probably be gone by Monday, but the funds really haven't been released technically yet, right? It's just been approved. So
That's
how are they
right.
running out of funding when they haven't been released yet?
Yeah, and I don't think that it's necessarily that they're going to run out of money. But what they're saying is that every single one of those banks right now are building their backlog. So imagine that each one of we're all different banks, and we have about a backlog of 300 businesses. The minute the funds are ready to go out, we all sending, those applications at the same time. And more than likely, we're not going to get 100% approval rate, right? And so the further in line you are, the less chances you're going to be. And I think that's what they probably meant when they told me, well, we hope the money lasts that long, because they probably have some kind of projections as to how many of us are out there sending those applications and how many applications that each one of those banks have. Are we really going to be able to do, 200 or 300, that kind of stuff. So that's what I think is going on.
Awesome. Very good. Well, I'd like to wrap up with just asking you a couple of general questions, Fabrice. And if anyone has more questions on the specific stimulus, that's what this call was about. But I do want to ask you some general questions about your business. Why are you doing what you do? What brought you to be passionate in the field you're in? I know I've sat down with you a few times and really felt that from you.
Yeah.
I would just like for you to share that with us a little bit here as we wrap it up.
Yeah, for sure. So, if I kind of go back to where it all started, my mom was a legal and tax advisor for Deloitte and Touche. If you know the accounting world, it is one of the big four largest accounting firms in the world. And she used to be a legal and tax advisor. So when it was time for me to go to college, I wasn't exactly sure what exactly I would, major in. And she mentioned, hey, I think you should try accounting, because that's something that you can use in anything that you're going to do in the future. And to be honest with you, I think she was looking up to her boss, and she really wanted me to kind of be in these shoes one day, right? He was a CPA. And so from there, that's when I started my accounting journey. I went to Wichita State and got my bachelor's degree in accounting. And then, right out of college, after that, my bachelor's degree, I was fortunate enough to work with, a small business, basically about 40 employees, small company in Wichita. And the advantage of actually being in the accounting department when you work for a small business is that you get a chance to work hand in hand with the CEOs, right? The actual owner of the company, the board, and really see how they make decisions. And I started to see how we as the accounting department were almost like the heart of the company. We had a ton of information, and they really kind of were almost depending on us every time that they were making decisions. They wanted to have a financials meeting on a monthly basis to ask those questions. And so that sense of importance, I guess, in the company really was driving me. I love the idea of being able to contribute and bring a ton of value to the organization. And so, I graduated from that space to actually becoming a controller, so the head of the accounting department in the construction industry. And it was the same approach. I really saw how important what I was doing was. But then whenever I left their company to try to go run my own business, I now was getting a chance to work with small businesses on a daily basis, the micro businesses. And I started to see that accounting was really something that they didn't have access to. I couldn't understand how they could make decisions without the numbers. Like, to me, that was blowing my mind. It was like, so you really don't know what kind of profit you have, but you're getting ready to invest into this new opportunity. You really don't know what it's going to bring you. And so I really saw, firsthand the importance of what I was doing at another level. Because, in the past, those companies were much bigger, but at that level, it just meant so much more. And so that really got me excited and really got me focused. But I've also noticed that a lot of people, I was more of a CFO. So what I really was doing was overseeing the accounting team, but also driving those decisions, helping with budgets and forecasting and things like that. But then I realized small businesses, the first thing they needed was, can someone keep me compliant? And what that means is, okay, can my taxes be done correctly? But on top of being done correctly, they didn't know the strategies. So that's where it got really fun for me. It's like, yeah, it's one thing to be able to do your taxes right so that you don't get in trouble with the law. But now, do you understand how to take advantage of the strategies that are in the tax code so that you keep most of that money, right? And so that's where I really found passion. And that's why, in my videos, I always say, my passion is to help small business owners keep as much as possible of their hard-earned income through tax and accounting strategies, because that's really where the fun is for me. It's like understanding their situation and going, oh, because you have this going on, this is available to you, that kind of stuff. So a lot of fun.
Awesome. And I really am just seeing the value of having someone like you working with, just partnering up with anybody that's in business, running their own show in a 1099 situation. There's just so
Yeah.
many opportunities. And even me just talking with you this morning, I'm like, wow, there's just so much I just am feeling from you that I could use in my world. Now, that being said, can you give us your favorite story, your favorite turnaround that you've seen with someone you've worked with? I know you may not be able to mention names legally and all that stuff, but if you could just maybe give us
Mhm.
some things that happened that you'll just never forget, that kind of was a big story for you.
Oh, so basically, like how much value I was able to bring to a
Yes.
to a particular client,
Yes.
basically. Yeah. Let me see. You say my favorite story. I'm trying to think here. Um, yeah, I think that there was a new business that was starting, more of a senior home business that was starting out. She really did not know much at all when it comes to accounting and finances and things like that. But we were able to, she was smart enough to understand that she needed to sit down with an accountant and kind of get that knowledge. So when she came in and kind of talked to me about her idea, what she was planning to do, she needed, we thought about, well, why don't we go through forecasting and do a real budget, right? Because she needed funding for the home, and needed to convince an investor to jump in and help her with that. So we actually sat down together for a good 2 hours, thought through the entire business, put the numbers together to forecast the next 12 months as soon as the business starts. And thanks to that, she was able to then convince a real estate investor to invest into a home that she could then rent and actually start that business, thanks to the projections, right? And so a lot of businesses may not know exactly where to start, may not even think that the numbers are part of this equation. They're probably thinking about the idea in itself, right? I got this idea, this is what I want to do. They're not thinking about the finance portion of it, but that's how big it could be. Just because we're able to work on the right forecasting, the right, budget, she was able to convince then an investor to jump in with her and actually, make the largest investment that she needs for the type of business that she had. And so I thought that was pretty special. That's just one story that I can think of right at the top of my head, but I'm sure there's many more that I could share. So
Awesome. Now, if someone does want to come to you and work with you,
mhm.
what does it like for this PPP? Let's talk about that specifically. Is,
Yeah.
is there, I know you gave me some free advice to kind of do it on my own, but if I want you to just do all the work, I send you all the documents, you take care of it for me. What does that price look like? And then also just to work with you, you don't have to give prices, but like in what ways do you work with businesses if I'm listening
Mhm.
to this after COVID and I'm looking for someone to help me with this area of my business? What does that look like with what you're doing right now as far as programs?
Yeah, so when it comes to the PPP or the idle loan, really, so those SBA loans, what I'm doing is, when it comes to the PPP, I'm actually getting in contact with the banks. So if you already have a bank that you have your business account at, I will probably go directly to that bank because you have a relationship there, so you have more chances of getting ahead on the line. So I talk to the bank directly, request all the documentation, put everything together for you, and then send it back to the bank for approval. We have basically a flat fee for that at $150 to be able to do that process, and that's $150 per application. So if we're doing, the PPP, that's 150, and then the IDO loans, same price. And then beyond that, when it comes to actually like working for us, working with us as your accounting firm, we have kind of two options. One option is like the unlimited approach where I become your accountant, your right-hand partner, and help you with everything that you need from an accounting perspective. So whether that's bank reconciliations, making sure your books are always on point, your financial statements every month, we can sit down together and go over them, making decisions, if you have any questions, you call your accountant and we make decisions that way, your taxes at the end of the year. So basically all of that packaged together, we have a subscription at $450 a month and we take care of everything. Or we have businesses that come in and say, well, I may not need all of that, but this is specifically what I need. And then we just kind of quote them, a flat fee based on the amount of work that they need at that point. So that's pretty much how it works.
Nice. That's very good. I like the subscription model. I will say I feel like it's underpriced at some level, especially with some of the headache I know I've been through with trying to do those things on my own. It's
Yeah.
and then to think of all the strategies that someone like you is educated on that I'm not educated on that I could have missed out on over the years. That that's basically right at about what $5,500 for the year. So when I think about headache and I think about
hmm
possibly saving that plus more. And
Now,
for some of these
now,
companies that are
obviously,
bringing in even more income,
that's right.
definitely opportunities just continue to
Yeah.
magnify.
And obviously this is something that is priced for the micro, the small, very small businesses. Now I have the larger clients that basically would require a ton of hours to actually come in, watch over their AP, AR, things like that, and then those become more custom, you know what I mean? But generally for the size of businesses that we're talking to, that the audience that we're probably talking to, that's generally what we offer.
Good.
So
We'll make sure that disclaimer is really clear. We don't want we
exactly.
don't want a half a billion dollar company coming in here getting your $450
Exactly.
monthly.
That's not gonna work.
Yeah, that would put you out of business and out of time. Man.
For
All
sure.
right, good stuff. So the typical customer you're working with, and obviously, if there's more work than what's necessary or what that takes care of, but it's really just a one and all package to where we don't have to worry
hmm
about that. Take care of me. So yeah, man, I love your heart, love your energy, love where you're at and why you're doing what you're doing, and really just think you're great value and asset to our community as a whole, not just as a business owner, but as a person. So just really appreciate you, Fabrice, just showing up here tonight and just showing up in general during this time. I feel like you've been one of the anchors in your industry and for
Hey,
just our
thank you.
businesses showing up the way you have. So I will say it's noticed from my perspective, and I know a lot of people will resonate with me on that. So
I appreciate it.
yeah. That being said, how can we find you out in the marketplace on social media? Where do we go if we want to follow up with Fabrice?
Yeah, sure. So you can, my Facebook page is Simplify My Numbers. So Simplify My Numbers with an S. You can find me on Facebook, my YouTube page as well. And then, on Instagram is just Fabrice Metan together. So FabriceMetan. And obviously my email address is just Fabrice@simplifymynumbers.com. And yeah, you can reach out to me on any of these platforms. I generally, love having, the first conversation just to understand where the business is at. What I've found out in my industry is that people always worry, like, are we giving too much information out there to people that I work with? But the reality is, there's a lot of complexity in accounting and in the strategies that we work with, that in the end, people would rather, trust us to take care of it for them anyway. So, I'm not afraid of sharing the information. I generally love learning more about the business first before we even talk about any sort of transaction. And so yeah, hopefully I can continue to help as many businesses as possible. It's definitely a mission of mine right now in this particular time to make sure that I'm helping as many businesses as possible get through these loans, because I understand that we all need some kind of additional fundings right now. And so I definitely want to leverage the contacts that I have at the bank and help as many of those businesses out there, take advantage of it. So
Awesome. Thank you for that. And your partner over here, your Spanish partner, Richard from Interlingual Interpreting Services, says you also offer your services in Spanish.
that's right.
So
And
that's
and
good.
that, I definitely want to thank, Interlingual Interpreting Services for that, because that just opened up a whole new, avenue, where I never realized how much need there was in the Latino community. And so by having their help translate everything that we do, it's been huge. We've already talked to about 5 different small business owners, and it's exciting to see that we can provide that help and reach so many people. So
It's awesome. Love the work that you guys are doing, really moving and shifting, making some things happen. So
for sure.
good stuff. Well, I'll throw all that stuff in the comments. Those that see this on YouTube, you can go ahead and find all the links there for you to follow up with Fabrice. Thank you again for your time, Fabrice, everyone for showing
Thank
up
you.
tonight. And we will call that a wrap. Episode
All right.
15.
Thanks, Daniel.
You're welcome.